Hello everyone, I'm Rosphere, and Spellbatching freaking sucked. I am so glad it's gone. Warriors finally feel good to play. All jokes aside, all classes feel much better to play, and yes, Warriors feel really good to play now because people can't outplay us just because of an MS batch window. And I'm going to show some examples of that here. Warriors essentially, and I know this is going to upset a lot of people to hear it because Warriors are broken and stupid overpowered in Classic, but Warriors have essentially been playing with one hand tied behind their back throughout the entirety of Classic, and I'm having so much fun in BGs now because I don't get caught in these traps that I knew that I should have. I pushed a button in time, like I interrupted a sheep, or I hopped into Berserker stance, before the fear went off, and it still didn't, like register on the server side and all this other stuff. There's so many examples of this, and I'm going to show a few of them here. In this example, it happens really fast, so you'll probably not be able to see it, but I'll be slowing it down here in a second. So that clip isn't an example of skill or anything like that, but it does show off how small the batch window actually is because of how quickly I was able to hop into Berserker stance and break the fear with Berserker Rage. And that's something that wouldn't have been possible with the 400 MS batch window. So I'm going to put the clip in slow motion here and show off how quick it actually happens because this is as slow as I can actually make it go with my video editing software. So you can see that I charged in immediately. I put hamstring up, hopped into Berserker stance, and the second that I hit Berserker stance, almost like the exact frame that I hit Berserker stance, I was also feared, and it didn't stop me from going into Berserker stance. Whereas beforehand, before the change, before Spellbatching was made to 10 milliseconds, it would not have worked that way. I would have been stuck in battle stance, and I would have had to sit out the fear. And with that not being the case anymore, it's so much better. Playing the game feels so much better because it feels way more reactive, just because simply it is more reactive. And there's so many different situations that I can use to describe this. This happened literally within the first, I'd say probably 8 minutes of the first BG I did after the patch had launched, where the Spellbatching window had been shortened down. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to hop into Photoshop here and kind of use that to describe exactly why this change is so huge, not just for Warriors, but for everybody. Okay, so this is just a really quick way for me to visually show off the Spellbatching window. So just for the sake of argument, let's assume that we're using Sheep, which is a 1-second cast for Mage. And right here you can see, up here at the very top, I have a ruler set up, right? So we have set up at 500. Right here you can see the line. Right here at 500, or roughly 500, we have the beginning of the cast. Right here at 1500, which is 1000, representing 1000 milliseconds, right? We have the end of the cast, right? So we have the beginning of the cast at 500, the end of the cast at 1500. Now the spell batch window itself is 400 milliseconds, or it was 400 milliseconds. So we have to go back here to 1100, right? And we'll draw a line here at 1100 to represent the beginning of the spellbatching window. And then the end of the spellbatching window would be here at 1500. Now it doesn't always line up this way, right? Obviously, you could have a spellbatch window that started at 1300 and went to 1700, for example. It doesn't always line up perfectly this way. It more than likely never does, or very infrequently does. But this is just to illustrate like a worst case scenario with the spell batch, because this does happen, and it created essentially the issue where if you interrupt, for example, if you use a pummel or an interrupt within this time span, it's not going to go through, right? So this massive portion of the cast, if you use an interrupt in this massive portion of the cast, that interrupt won't go through and the sheep will still happen. right? So even if it was at 1300, for example, right here at 1300, and you use your interrupt here, it's not going to go through. So what that does is it makes it much easier, much easier for a spellcaster to juke your interrupt, because they don't have to worry about somebody waiting to about 95% of their cast, which would be like right here, to actually make sure that the cast is going to go through and interrupt. So to illustrate the example, or the difference between the 400 ms, which is this entire space of the cast, it's 40% of an entire 1 second cast, right? So to illustrate the difference between that 400 ms batch window and the 10 ms batch window that is currently in the game. So here we're at 1500, we'll go over 10. So this is roughly 10 ms right here. That's the 10 ms batch window. If you interrupt between here and there, it won't go through. But if you interrupt from here to the rest of it, it will. So that's the big difference between the MS batch window and why things feel so much more reactive now, because you don't have this massive portion of dead space that you're dealing with, or that we had to deal with throughout all of Classic. So that's essentially how the MS batch window worked. If you interrupted within this point, but here between here and the end of the cast, or wherever the batch window was, say it was at 1200 again, we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1600, boom. If you interrupt between this point, if you interrupt between here and here, then the spell batch or the interrupt won't go through, and the sheep will still go through. So essentially, it was a handicap, unintended handicap for casters, making it much easier for them to actually get spells off and not have to deal with interrupts. Alright, so that's just about all I got for this video. So if you liked the video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. But also, if you're one of the viewers that consistently comes back to my videos and watches these on a consistent basis, I am sorry I haven't made a video in a little while. It's been about a week and a half, but that's because I've been having some issues with my other PC. And I managed to get a new computer built with a 30 series card at MSRP, so I didn't end up overspending it all for it. I'm super excited. I've been able to play things like Cyberpunk with ray tracing turned all the way up, and it looks absolutely amazing without any sort of throttling at all. It handles everything like an absolute beast. So, been having a lot of fun with that, but I will be back to making videos on a consistent basis next week, starting on Monday.